Good afternoon. My name is Lou Falco. I'm the Sheriff of Rockland County. Today is a very, very daunting day for us in law enforcement and the people of Rockland County. I want to start though by introducing people that are representing the families. Constant Frazier, representing Waverly Chipper Brown. Sergeant John Hanshar of the Clarkstown Police Department, representing Sergeant O'Grady. And the Page family is not available for today, but I'm sure you can reach out to them for a statement. Andrew Cuomo's decision to commute the 75-year life sentence of convicted murderer and domestic terrorist David Gilbert while leaving in disgrace is another example of the victims' rights and the rights of the families being overshadowed by the concerns for the criminals. Gilbert was convicted of 3 murders for killing Sergeant Ed O'Grady, P.O. Waverly Chipper Brown, and Brinks guard Peter Page, along with the wounding of Detective Arthur Keenan, Brinks guards Joseph Trombino, and James Kelly. In his attempt to escape, he tried to kill recently deceased police chief Alan Colson from the South Nyack Police Department. David Gilbert deserves to spend the rest of his life in prison. How many people do a terrorist have to kill to remain in prison? Is 3 not enough? Several media outlets have reported that Gilbert's son, Cesar Bodine, spoke with Cuomo, and yet Cuomo has never taken a call from the family members or reached out for the family members. Cesar Bodine could still visit his father in prison, but these families can only visit their families at the cemetery. That's what's so disgraceful in this case. The criminal's family get the call with the governor, and the victims' families are ignored. These men left behind 9 children who have all grown up without their fathers to share their lives' milestones and their achievements. To tell them that one person responsible for the murder of their father served enough time, or that he shouldn't face the full consequences for his crimes, in a word, is totally unconscionable. I was working that day and many days thereafter. And on that day, it was bedlam here in Nyack and in Nyack. If you can see to my left and my right, there's some of the photos on the collages. Mr. Gilbert, along with everybody else, Bodine, Chesimar, all of them, stood up in the court when David Ritter was conducting his courtroom and said, "We will not be part of this. We don't belong to this America." And now they're asking for our laws and our rights to be pardoned. The actions of David Gilbert and his co-conspirators changed the lives of many in Rockland County on that day in 1981, and he does not, I repeat, does not deserve parole. Now I am asking the public for their help in writing the parole board as soon as possible to tell them that David Gilbert should not, and again I repeat, should not be released. The parole board, all appointed by then Governor Cuomo, has released more than 15 cop killers since 2017. And if this gentleman is released, he'll be number 18. Let's work not to allow David Gilbert to be another one. We need to let the voices of the victims and our voices in Rockland County be heard by members of the parole board, and we need to do it now. At this time, I will turn it over to our District Attorney, Tom Walsh. At the end, I will give you a closing statement and take questions. District Attorney Walsh.
Thank you, Sheriff. I'm Tom Walsh, the Rockland County District Attorney. Yesterday's announcement of Governor Cuomo's granting clemency to David Gilbert shook the very foundations of our community. As a lifelong Rockland County resident, I can still remember exactly where I was when I heard the news of the Brinks robbery. South Broadway in the village of Nyack. I clearly recall the sense of fear and deep sadness spreading throughout our community on that tragic afternoon. October 20th, 1981 is a day that forever changed the county of Rockland. A day Rockland's innocence was lost. I was extremely dismayed to learn the commutation of David Gilbert, who was a getaway driver and alleged mastermind for the Brinks armored car robbery. Make no mistake, David Gilbert's actions on that fateful day is directly responsible for the killing of two Nyack police officers, Edward O'Grady and Waverly Brown, and Brinks guard Peter Page. Every year on October 20th, we gather on this site to pay homage to the slain officers and show our unified support for their families. The commutation of David Gilbert is a slap in the face to the loved ones left behind of this atrocity and to our Rockland community as a whole. This horrific incident is forever ingrained in the memory of all of us here in Rockland County. We vow to never forget, and I stand here today with my fellow law enforcement colleagues and public officials in upholding that promise to the families. Think of the message that this sends to the good law-abiding citizens of Rockland County, this state, and our great nation. David Gilbert does not deserve to walk our streets. I strongly urge the New York State Parole Board to take into consideration the impact that the release of David Gilbert will have on the families of Edward O'Grady, Waverly Brown, and Peter Page, and Rockland as a whole. They will never get to see their loved ones again. We must never forget these heroes, and we will not rest until our voices are heard. Please join all of us in petitioning the Parole Board not to release David Gilbert and prevent the further victimization of these poor families in our county of Rockland. Thank you. Senator Mueller.
Good afternoon, and thank you everyone for being here. Andrew Cuomo's final act as governor was a disgusting betrayal to the people of Rockland County, to the families of Peter Page, Edward O'Grady, and Waverly Brown. Andrew Cuomo stabbed every law enforcement officer in the back with this disgraceful decision to commute the sentence of a cop killer. It does not matter that he was only the getaway driver. When you participate in the death of a law enforcement officer, you must be held accountable. There is no commutation of that. Edward O'Grady, Waverly Brown, and Peter Page have been dead for nearly 40 years because of the actions of David Gilbert and his co-defendants. There is absolutely zero excuse for Governor Cuomo in his final act to commute this sentence. Let us be abundantly clear. As a society, we must have zero tolerance for anyone who participates in the death of a law enforcement officer. The people who are sworn to uphold and protect our residents. If we as a society cannot stand by them when they are victim to a horrendous, heinous, vile crime, shame on us. Shame on us. And so I say this today to every New Yorker of good conscience and good faith. Write to the Parole Board immediately. Write to the Parole Board immediately and demand that they do not grant parole to David Gilbert. He is undeserving. And I don't care how many good acts he may have done in prison, 40 years is never enough for the families that lost their loved ones that day, and for our community here in Rockland County that was victim to one of the most horrendous, heinous crimes ever committed. There's a reason that so many in law enforcement are standing here, so many of my colleagues in government are standing here. This is unacceptable, and we should never tolerate it, and certainly not from a disgraced ex-governor like Andrew Cuomo. So I ask everybody here today to join us in this effort to ensure that David Gilbert never, ever walks free. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm State Assemblyman Ken Zabrowski, and I'm glad to be here, not glad to be here, but I'm proud to be here to stand with my colleagues, and my colleagues in both government and law enforcement, and of course, the family members of the victims, and also the people of Rockland County. The District Attorney mentioned earlier how we gather here every year. I've grown up my entire life in Rockland County, and the Brinks robbery and the carnage that happened throughout that day and afterward left an indelible mark on the people of Rockland County that to this day is a stain on our county and something that we come together each and every year so that's never forgotten. We show our support for the victims that day, for law enforcement, and for law and order here in our great suburban county. Time doesn't wash away what this was. It was an orchestrated attack of domestic terrorism that resulted in people losing their lives. But it didn't stop there. At the trial, Mr. Gilbert and others expressed no remorse whatsoever and denounced our country, denounced our system of government, denounced our legal system, and for the most part, refused to even take part in their own defense. These are not actions of somebody that deserves leniency. And if we go back to that day, 40 years doesn't wash away the events that happened, where we stand today, or the events that happened in that courtroom. And if we go back to that day, what we should really do is look to the words of the folks that were involved on the streets. We heard from our sheriff, who was working during that time, and also the folks that were in the courtroom. So what I would leave folks with, as we decry this commutation and oppose the possible parole, is the words of Judge Ritter upon sentencing. And he said, and I quote, "They hold society in contempt and have no respect for human life. They anticipated resistance and went about their task armed to the teeth. I harbor no illusions. Everything that the defendants have said indicates that they will repeat their lawless conduct. Each defendant represents a clear and present danger to society. This case calls for the longest minimum term permitted by law." Those are the words of the judge that heard the evidence and conducted the trial. And that is the sentence that should stand. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Daniel Wilson, Police Chief with the South Nyack Police Department, President of the Police Chiefs Association of Rockland County. I want to thank everybody that worked quickly and diligently to put this press conference together. As you can see by the turnout, our stance is abundantly clear. The commutation of David Gilbert's sentence is horrible, disgraceful, and unforgivable. We are standing on sacred ground. This was a battleground for police officers of the Nyack Police Department, Sergeant O'Grady and Officer Brown, who lost their lives defending this nation. This also is a sacred time. We are 2 months away from the 40th anniversary of the Brinks Robbery. We are also 2 weeks away from the 20th anniversary of September 11th. The words "never forget" are not just a tagline. They're something that mean deep down to the core of New Yorkers and Americans. It is something that we take seriously. Andrew Cuomo does not. He wanted one last me moment in the last seconds, the last minute of his disgraced tenure as governor of our chief. He has tarnished his legacy that will only be remembered for self-serving attitudes and behaviors. Moving forward, we can do something. We can act united. And I urge New Yorkers, write emails, write letters, make phone calls. And it doesn't end with just one. It can be multiple, numerous. Make our voices loud, make them constant. They must never, ever diminish about our feelings here today. And I urge the parole board, when terrorist David Gilbert is before you, your mind should already be made up. He should never, ever, ever breathe free air again. He deserves to live his life behind bars. I will conclude by saying that my prayers and heart goes out to the families, the O'Grady family, the Brown family, and the Page family. We will never forget. I will never forget. God bless New York. God bless the United States of America.
Good afternoon. My name is Guillermo Rosa. I'm the Deputy County Executive, and I would like to make a statement on behalf of County Executive Mente. With his actions last night, Andrew Cuomo has once again debased himself and the office of the governor of the state of New York. As if victimizing 11 women, including members of his own staff, was not despicable enough, his commutation of the 75-year life sentence of David Gilbert is a further assault on the people of Rockland County and the people of the state of New York. Andrew Cuomo continues to focus on the well-being of murderers rather than the victims of these horrible offenses and on our law enforcement personnel. Our thoughts, prayers, and sympathy are with the friends and families of the victims of the 1981 Brinks Robbery. As Andrew Cuomo leaves the governor's office in disgrace, County Executive Day and I pledge to fight year after year after year to keep David Gilbert from ever being granted parole. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Clarkstown Supervisor George Holman, and it's really a very sad occasion, a sad day. For those of us that have lived here for the last 40 years, we know how important and how tragic the Brinks attacks were. I remember being in high school. I was on the football team. Football practice was canceled as the events unfolded. There was real fear. There was terror. The Brinks attack did exactly what it was meant to do. It was an attack on our country. It was an attack on our institutions. It was an attack on our police. And it took 3 lives and injured many other law enforcement officers in the process. We haven't forgotten in Rockland. We're 40 years coming up on October 20th since that terrible attack. And I can't help but realize the irony that 20 years since 9/11 in Afghanistan will now be subject back to the Taliban and terrorism. And 40 years after the Brinks attack, we have terrorists that are now going to be able to walk free and already have walked free. When is enough enough? David Gilbert should never see the light of day, and Andrew Cuomo's commutation of his sentence is perhaps the low point of a lot of low points of this past year for Governor Cuomo. What we all need to do is stand firmly with our law enforcement, firmly with the people of Clarkstown where this terrible attack took place, firmly with the people of Rockland County, write to the parole board, make your voices heard to make sure that this killer never experiences freedom. The 3 victims, brave men, never had that chance. Standing here with me today is one of our police sergeants, Sergeant John Hanchar. His uncle was taken in that attack. He never had the opportunity to grow up with his uncle, seeing his accomplishments as he followed in his footsteps in the police department. David Gilbert should never see freedom. He forfeited that with his cowardly participation in these attacks. All of us need to band together with our law enforcement and make sure that we make our voices heard so that he is never released. Thank you.
Good afternoon and welcome to the village of Nyack. My name is Don Hammond and I'm the mayor of Nyack. It's such a privilege to serve this community. I can't tell you how disappointed, how sad, how outraged I am that one of the last acts of our former governor was to commute this sentence and to reopen wounds, to reopen the tragedy and difficult times that we have with our families that lost loved ones, lost their dads, lost their uncles. To have that happen at this point in time is just completely unacceptable to me. Our community will reach out. I've already started reaching out to the members of the families of the Page family, of the Brady family, and of Chipper's family, to tell them that we're thinking of them, that we're going to uphold them, that we're going to care for them. That is part of our responsibility now. Yes, we should make sure that we're active in responding to the parole issues, but we also have to hold each other up for this. This is a difficult time for these families. The wound keeps being opened over and over and over again. It has to stop. It has to stop. We stand with the families, we stand with our law enforcement partners in this, and we know that we will continue to reach out and care for our community and for those of the families that continue to harbor this terrible event in their lives. Thank you for being here and for making this a public issue, for making sure that everyone knows how we all feel about this, and thank you to the folks that put this together on such short notice. Thank you.
Good afternoon, my name is Owen. I'm here to represent Senator Elijah Reichlin Melnick of the 38th Senate District. I would like to read a statement from the Senator. The outgoing governor's decision to grant clemency to one of the Brinks murderers is a slap in the face of everyone in Rockland who lived through the horror of seeing Rockland County victimized by the domestic terrorists of the Weather Underground. With the 40th anniversary of the Brinks robbery coming up in just 2 months, Cuomo's decision rubs salt in the wounds of the friends and family members who still grieve the loss of Sergeant Edward O'Grady, Officer Waverly Chipper Brown, and Brinks guard Peter Page. When I first became aware of Mr. Gilbert's clemency petition earlier this year, I sent a letter to Governor Cuomo urging him to reject the clemency petition. Many other local elected officials sent similar letters. I condemn this decision, which will make this year's ceremony on October 20th especially difficult for our community. Shame on the outgoing governor for this decision.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike O'Meara. I'm the president of the New York State Association of Pbas. We represent about 45,000 police officers in New York State, including the Rockland PBA. And we are disgusted by this act that former Governor Cuomo did on his last day. It's been so prevalent in the last couple of years that we put felons before families, criminals before common sense. Police officers are standing here every day. We look around and we're shaking our heads. We're going to work, we try to do the right thing, and we keep getting these things done to us, our families, our departed members. It's truly horrible. We are all affected by this. The community is affected by this. If you don't think there's a direct correlation between rising crime and progressive politics that have put criminals before common sense, then you're kidding yourself. It's happening all over the United States of America. When we change the laws to protect criminals and we disregard victims, we put everybody in a bad way. And this parting blow by this pervert was really the last straw. We're disgusted by it, and we just want to say to the families and to the colleagues and to the police officers that served here, we stand with you today and we stand with you always, and someday common sense will come back into our communities and this nonsense will end.
just want to make it clear, off to my left, your right, is the Rockland County PBA and members of the Clarkstown PBA. Would you like to say a couple words?
Good afternoon, everybody. Chris Kieran, former Rockland County PBA president. Our current president, narrators, is spending time with his family in these waning summer days. Our statement from the county PBA is that anger, disappointment, and frustration are only three polite words that we could use to describe these disgraceful acts and clemency from Governor Cuomo for David Gilbert. David Gilbert was a domestic terrorist. He was part of the Weather Underground. You cannot refute that, okay? They put their own criminal activity in the forefront to advance their own needs. Cuomo didn't consult with the families of Brown, O'Grady, and Page. He didn't consult with them in January of 2017 when he commuted Judith Clark's sentence. We asked him why. He never gave us an answer. Yet again, he did it this time around with David Gilbert. Never consulted with the family. These are acts of cowardice. Okay? Law enforcement and law-abiding citizens across the nation take yet another slap in the face by the political elite. Governor Cuomo is walking out of office, or is now out of office, in disgrace. His last acts were disgraceful. Thank you.
I want to thank all my colleagues in law enforcement, the officers, the chiefs of police that stand behind me, and all the elected officials that came together today to be united. And I'm going to end with this. Thank you for coming here and hearing the pleas of all of Rockland County for justice for these officers and their families. Justice for the victims of a convicted murderer and terrorist. At this time, I'll turn it over to questions from...
John would like to speak on behalf of
Good afternoon. I'll be brief. I know it's hot. Edward O'Grady was my uncle. Died 10 feet from here. This is a photo that Chase Boudin likes to post. It's him, his mother, his wife, and his father taken in prison. He often laments how sad he is that he often has to wait 24 hours until his father has phone privileges, or how he can only visit him on certain days and he has a long drive to the prison. What our families wouldn't give for a long drive to be with our loved ones. His comments show an institutional arrogance and elitism that for someone who's a Rhodes Scholar, it's amazing he can't see what he sounds like. Our families have been through a lot and we persevered. Every one of the 9 children left fatherless are successful. They're attorneys, naval aviators, in the medical field. They've moved on, they're not bitter people. But fair is fair. This man was sentenced by a jury of his peers to life in jail. And for Governor Cuomo, ex-Governor Cuomo, with a stroke of a pen to end that, doesn't seem fair. Now Cuomo will spin this that it's really not his decision, it's up to the parole board. A parole board comprised of entirely his appointees, including a member who married a prisoner she met while on a parole board. We knew Governor Cuomo was corrupt. We look at the Moreland Commission, the Buffalo Billions. We knew he was a bully. We knew he was a creep based on the countless women that have come forward, and certainly the more that are afraid to come forward. And like all bullies, when you get right down to it, he's a coward. He's doing this, I believe, for political gain, to try to reinvent himself and get back in the public life by gaining favor with people in power. I'm not Chase Boudin. I can't get a governor or a president on the phone. I'm just a little civil servant. I hope these people get out of jail and somehow make amends and don't harm anybody else. But I'm not so sure that's going to happen. And what message does it send? My career's over as a policeman almost. But we're having a hard time recruiting young officers. And that's a problem, because you want the police department to be able to be selective. You want them to pick the best of the bunch. You don't want all the good candidates saying, there's no way I'm getting involved in this line of work, because then the police have to take what's left. Governor Cuomo, 3 years ago, I asked you to call me. You went and visited with Judith Clark in prison for an hour. None of the 9 children have gotten so much as a telegram or a phone call. We find out about these releases from the media. And to the media, if I could just ask one favor. Houdin's a Rhodes Scholar and an attorney. Cuomo is also an attorney. They know the law. So it's incredibly insulting when Governor Cuomo minimizes David Clark's role by saying he was just a getaway driver. I urge you, if you don't know the facts of this robbery, to please do a quick search. 6 people opened fire on innocent Brinks guards. They then jumped in the back of a truck. They were 6 African Americans. They jumped in the back of a U-Haul and put 2 white people in front in an attempt to fool the police. David Gilbert was good at his job. He fooled the police. If David Gilbert had a gun, he would have been taken into custody and those 3 men would be alive. But he tricked the cops. He planned this robbery in advance. He came up to Rockland County on numerous days before the day of this robbery. He participated in previous robberies in the Bronx and in Connecticut, in which people were harmed and I believe killed. And he knew what was happening. David Gilbert is no babe in the woods, and shame on Governor Cuomo for painting him as such. Thank you very much.
We're also asking for the public to do their part